Hello, and welcome to the first Layer 1 to 3 virtual conference. My name is Sven Freudenfeld. I'm part of the Lanner team. I'm the CTO of the Telecom Application Business Unit. And today we wanted to go over some of the use cases where white boxes have been used for disaggregating the network. And I will also give a bit of an insight on the current status on the different applications and use cases in this regard. So let's get started. So ultimately, the overall network transformation will show multiple areas for the use case of white boxes. We have been investing in the SD-WAN space, as you can see on the bottom right, for over the last 4 years. Traditionally, our company is an ODM partner for many of the network security companies, and we have created a platform approach to really disaggregate the hardware from the software, specifically for universal CPEs, universal customer premise equipment, but also for SD-WAN. And all these platforms are intended to be operating in a white box mode, meaning it's an open platform to support multiple VNFs and multiple software partners onto this platform. So that's the initial approach. For the last couple of months, we see the demand for LTE and Wi-Fi and the requirements to be included into the platform approach. And I have a couple of examples where I will go into a bit deeper following the sessions. The next level where we see a disaggregated approach is taking place is around the access technology. So meaning, either the distributed units or also the centralized units for Cloud Run or Openrun deployments. And these platforms have specific requirements, primarily in terms of the support for precision time protocol, for an example, but also for the need for acceleration. So not only an x86 approach, but also acceleration for either an FPGA or a GPU workload. And they also have been limited in terms of space. So there are specific requirements what we consider as a white box as well to do deployments for Openrun, but also for Cloud Run and Cloud Run. The next level beyond that is really the service provider edge. So the service provider edge is providing the aggregation. It's coming either from an SD-WAN device or universal CPE device and basically aggregating the traffic as an aggregation point. And these platforms typically require sort of a network infrastructure for networking and compute acceleration and storage at the same time. So these are some of the key areas we want to focus here in this presentation. So SD-WAN is no longer a hype. It's been very successful, especially now during COVID-19. It's actually more a business model which is considered by service providers to bring managed services to the enterprise. And of course, there are different directions to do the deployment. Traditionally, it was either a gray box or a black box for customer premise equipment. This trend is moving towards a fully open platform for deploying multiple applications as a virtual network function on the customer premise equipment. And the trend here is to have a multi-vendor scenario, that means that ultimately you have in some cases for universal CPE, you have an orchestrator, and the orchestrator then basically brings in the virtual network functions for networking, but also for enterprise applications for, let's say, unified communications, and so on. So the unique thing here is that, you know, most of the platforms are moving towards the deployment model of using 4G LTE devices built into it, sometimes even dual LTE support for multiple carriers. But also a big demand for universal CPE devices will be the 5G strategy for 5G devices besides Wi-Fi. Of course, these platforms are multi-core platforms, meaning that, you know, we're running multiple applications at the same time. But the fact is that it's not any given kind of platform. So a lot of hype is that it's very, you know, it's very cost sensitive. The hardware always is getting squeezed by the end of the day in order to deploy it. These are usually large deployments most of the time. However, not any server platform will be suitable for that. And I give you a couple of examples because, you know, typically you have sort of a multi-core CPU, but it's not only the CPU that counts. In these platforms, there's also elements for trusted platform management, for security aspects, or a board management controller also for managing the platform. With these universal CPEs or SD-WAN devices, the challenge is that these devices will be deployed somewhere in multiple, many locations. And that means that once deployed, the intent is to do zero-touch provisioning. But there are multiple aspects on the platform layer. So it's not only that you're providing a virtual firewall to the enterprise, but the whole security aspect on the platform itself can contain multiple loopholes if you don't choose the right platform. An example is that, you know, all this platform have devices from, you know, multiple devices and firmware options. And these firmware options and BIOS options, if they are not chosen properly, they can become a vulnerability for your enterprise or for the managed services you try to deploy. So, and the platform has been built that we can eliminate these concerns by using a full-fledged BIOS, which has all the security features built in for the security aspect. But also it's a managed BIOS infrastructure. So it's not an open source, what we've been using. So it's fully validated and tested. Keep in mind, we're coming from a security aspect, we're building security appliances. We have the expertise to do that, and we build it all into this white box approach. And the second aspect is, you know, how do we manage with different firmware elements in this platform and the security of the firmware of all the different devices built into the platform. So that's a very important aspect to consider when choosing the right white box approach. And, you know, what we've been developing and rolling out to the market is multiple scalable platforms. So from a small, medium, large, and extra large, you know, you have different options on that. For deployment. For an example, the lowest end, the small one, comes in different flavors, all the way up to 16 cores. We are a premier partner with Intel, and we will update these platforms as processors becoming available. And of course, deploying any universal CPE and SD-WAN is not without the partners. So we have a broad ecosystem with partners who are deploying either universal CPE or SD-WANs, and they are, you know, primarily a software company operating on white boxes. So we're doing validation and testing and qualification with these partners to roll out these services with a short period of time to bring the service providers to revenue quick. A few examples here. We see here it's one. I picked one of them. It's Adva, one of our close partners in the ecosystem, and you can see this is really an example for cloud retail deployment. So you can see that the challenge here is that when you send a platform to a retail location, there is no IT personnel available. Most of the time, it will be shipped connected to some of the infrastructure, including the point of sale support and all of that. So the important thing here is that the critical path is when we look at zero-touch provisioning, for an example, for the retail itself, if the point of sales is going down because of lack of networking or lack of connectivity, then that means loss of revenue for that retail location. And same thing is applicable for surveillance and Wi-Fi support for the given location. So so it's very critical, it's very important to choose the right underlying hardware to make sure that all these elements are being validated, so there is no bad experience for deploying into these retail locations. In this case, we also done full certification for Verizon ODI, but also for PTCRB, so it's ready to go. We have a short turnaround time to actually go into a live deployment. The second one is another part of ours, same thing, small, medium business, branches and retail. It's really the combination of Orchestrator and deploying VNFs on the same type of hardware. Same thing, is fully validated and certified for Verizon ODI, but also for PTCRB. And then another good example is, this is a pure SD-WAN play, where we have been working with a company called 120 Technology. They're doing session-based routing. That means that they are a bit different, more innovative than others for the SD-WAN play. And we have done a very large deployment with a large auto parts store in the US with over 6,000 locations. So, and in this case, it's really coming together where we bring in other elements, unified communications for voice and traditional way of communicating, including T1, E1. But also connecting in the point of sales terminals. So these platforms are really the framework for the managed services for universal CPEs and SD-WAN in the network. What we do different, we have done significant investment in universal CPEs as well in SD-WAN. We've gone the extra step, a mile, to actually provide products which are already pre-certified and tested. And so we created multiple SKUs or options with our partners to be deployed instantly without the need to wait for 9 months before the certification is taking place. We can actually shorten that deployment model rapidly. So that means you can go instantly into services using these Whiteboxes as a Whitebox approach. Overall, what we see in the market is we have about we see in our revenue basically from a traditional network security revenue compared to the SD-WAN and universal CPE revenue, we see about 20% of the overall revenue. 66% remains for traditional network security, but we see an uptake. And then primarily, the biggest uptake is in the Americas, followed by Asia Pacific and then EMEA. And I'm proud to say that Gartner has identified us in 2019 that we cover 55% of the market, which choose the Lanner appliances for that. The next area of the Whitebox approach is really what I mentioned earlier, the Openrun or SD-RAN deployment, which means we have distributed units, but also centralized units. And there are two different areas. So on the distributed units, there are specific requirements for PTP or IEEE 1588. On the centralized unit, it's really the matter of scalability. So we have created a portfolio specifically for us Whiteboxes, which cover both areas for the DU, but also for the CU. And there's a separate presentation which covers the Openrun initiative where I'm on a panel. But we have been identified Openrun as one of the use cases for Whiteboxes. And the interesting thing here is from a requirement point of view, besides the timing and the PTP access, there are also potentially requirements for an underlying P4 network infrastructure. So P4, if you're not familiar with it, P4 is it's an interface for an SDN infrastructure, and the P4 runtime provides the framework for a programmable network, and that means that with the capabilities in these platforms we can bring in network telemetry, but also programmability to all the different aspects in the network. So you can see from you have most likely a coexisting between 4G LTE and 5G at the RAN side, so you can gradually introduce the separations between CU and DU as a distributed appliance, but also as a centralized appliance, and then move up the stack using another white box approach for deploying virtual EPC, which service gateways, but also signaling gateway, but also packet gateway. 1588 is becoming a critical aspect on that. So we see that not only the introduction of the time PTP options in the header is not only the cell side gateway, it can also be a requirement at the distributed unit. So we actually have the capability as an option built into the platform. It also has a specific depth just to be mounted into a cell site, so these are also elements to consider when you look at deploying Openrun or virtual run. And then the next level beyond that is really the service provider edge. And we have created a platform which contains network programmability, networking, computing, storage, and acceleration. So basically that's becoming the sort of a white box, the service provider edge, bringing it all together. So you have our retail locations of the branches for SD-WAN universal CPEs, which run, or from a cable operator aspects, set-top boxes, which really getting into the same edge compute platform to be aggregated, and then deploying either virtual BNG, virtual broadband network gateway, virtual load balancer, virtual firewall, virtual provider edge, virtual EPC, and so on. So what we do different here is we integrating switching and networking into the same platform in addition to compute, and it's all software defined. So it's all internal connectivity without the need of a top of rack switching. If you are not familiar with P4, I encourage to read up on the P4 initiative. It provides a lot of differentiator, especially at the edge. Node traffic is as dynamic as network traffic on the edge compute side. It can also provide a framework for segment routing, v6. And there's a part of ours, Noviflow, has or is presenting a use case with service provider Bell Canada, how this can be leveraged in the deployment of a network using segment routing v6. And then, so this is the large platform. You know, as I said, we bring in, we're providing a programmable edge. We have better visibility by introducing network telemetry, but also it's scalable on that end. A couple of use cases we can see here. As I mentioned, we can deploy multiple virtual network functions at either a multi-dwelling unit or even a central office redesigned as data center. This could be, leveraging the internal connectivity with multiple 100 gigs to the backplane using a programmable switch fabric, and allows the SDN framework to be a provisioning tool with zero-touch provisioning. So, you know, big differentiator. We save a lot of truck roll. There is no need for cabling and wiring on site. The internal connectivity, so you will have this document available for download, also passed by our booth. We have some people there virtually, but it's giving you a quick snapshot on how this platform has been architectured, including all the different framework, including the manageability aspect on that. So feel free to pass by, and we'll give you a bit more insights on that. Ultimately, bottom line is, this kind of approach as a converged MEC platform is saving a lot of cost in terms of operations, space, and power. And that, we consider that as a white box, which can host multiple VNFs, similar as or let's say it as a mini data center at the edge for multi-access edge computing. So this concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly or contact us at contact@lannerinc.com.